Canada is in its final push for a seat on the United Nations Security Council. Right now, Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne is in New York City appealing for support before 193 member states submit their votes tomorrow. Since 2015, Canada has spent about $2 million competing against Norway and Ireland for one of two rotating seats on the influential body. Today, the Prime Minister made his case for why Canada is best positioned to serve in that role.
Right now, as we look at the kind of world we're going to come out of post-COVID, we need a country like Canada that is big enough to make a difference, but small enough to know we can't do it alone, and we will continue to work together.
So has Canada swayed other countries to support this bid? Mia Mottley is Prime Minister of Barbados. I spoke to her from the capital city of Bridgetown just yesterday. Hi, Prime Minister. Great pleasure to welcome you to our program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have a number of questions for you on how your country is and has navigated this pandemic. But if you'll indulge me, I wanted to start off with a question on Canada's efforts to secure a seat at the Security Council. Do you think that this country has made a case for that seat?
I believe so. And Barbados and Canada, we've had a long relationship. We share common values. And we have been working together on a number of things. We don't always agree on everything, but for the most part, the common platform of values helps us to agree on most things. And we as a country have made a very clear determination that we will be supporting your country. We see you as family.
And let me follow up with that and ask you if from your perspective, given what's happened with this pandemic, do you think that has in any way altered what countries are using, what people like you are using to make that assessment? Like, are you taking into account things that you might not have been prior to the outset of this pandemic?
I'm sure that other countries will. We haven't. We've made our case to ourselves very clearly in terms of what matters to us. And this is not just about a transaction. Barbados believes in dealing with people on the basis of relationships and to make sure that those relationships can serve our permanent interests. We don't have permanent friends, we have permanent interests, but we recognize that if we have people with whom we are working, who we know well, and whose values, who we would like to share, then that gives us a common platform for going forward. One of the key things, for example, is that we've just had a National Population Commission report that shows that we are underpopulated. And there is no country in the world that has managed migration better, in our view, than Canada. Canada has always also been that country at the Inter-American Development Bank, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, that is our executive director. And therefore, they are acutely aware of our financial and economic circumstances and the extent to which middle-income countries such as our own are falling through the cracks because we are too small to be able to command market access, and we are too rich to be considered poor. So we fall right through the cracks, and particularly in the context of this COVID epidemic, where countries are being left out because of definitions and criteria that make no sense whatsoever in terms of determining who really should access concessional funds or who should access support in being able to buy in vitro diagnostics, whether it is vaccine when it comes, or therapeutics, or indeed testing kits and swabs. These are the real things that are affecting us in COVID. And if there's anything, the pandemic has really shown all of the cracks of the world even more apparent that people would have run away from or hidden from.
How much of a challenge has it been for your country to procure some of the things that you just laid out, for example, those testing kits?
It's like the wild, wild west. And if Canada, if you have already been a victim of countries taking defensive action with respect to the procurement of items, you can imagine what it is like for small states. We've had to reach out to the PAHO, we've had to reach out to WHO and our own CARPHA, which is the Caribbean Public Health Agency. And I thank God for all three agencies, because without that, we would really have received next to nothing. We have received sufficient, but not enough to do what we need to do, particularly as we seek to open back up our borders, because our countries cannot stay completely closed off from the rest of the world. We are open economies. We are the most travel and tourism dependent region in the world, and one one of the most trade-dependent regions in the world. So when you consider those things, we can't stay closed for long. But we have to find people who, like us, have a commitment to safety and will provide a biosafe environment such that we can have the air bubbles or the air bridges in order to be able to make them safe when they come here and to keep our population safe when they come. You know, I leave you to go and have that discussion with our labor movement and our private sector this afternoon to see how best we can open back Barbados in the next few weeks in the safest of ways.
Is that your intention, Prime Minister, to relax restrictions at the border? I note that, for example,
Yes.
I think the deadline is June 30th for the restriction on commercial flights landing. Is it your intention after that to change that?
So what date we do it, we'll decide after these consultations this week, because we want to make sure that we have everything in place that will guarantee as much safety as we can. One of the difficulties relates to the fact that the airlines do not want to test themselves at all. So testing either has to take place at an accredited lab before people travel or when people land if we're going to keep our people safe. And we're trying to work with easier charters have more easily accepted the need for tests that are appropriately validated by either WHO or PAHO or the FDA in the US or whoever is the appropriate regulatory entity. But once we can get that, then we can maintain the levels of safety for those who are visiting and more importantly, or as importantly, sorry, for those who are working and those who are on island. We need a win-win for everybody.
I was wondering what your discussions, or if there have been discussions, for example, with the Prime Minister of this country around travel, because the message that we have received from public health officials here is kind of stay home, right? That there is an inherent risk to any international travel. Are there any discussions taking place about that messaging?
I've actually written your Prime Minister on behalf of the Caribbean community. I'm still chairing the Caribbean community until the end of the month. And these, as you know, most of our countries in the community are travel and tourism dependent. And what we've asked for is for discussions between our public health officials and your public health officials so that we can ensure that we satisfy them, the scientists, that we are taking as many precautions as we can take to ensure that for your citizens and for our citizens, the levels of safety are appropriate.
And has there been any response to that letter so far?
We are hoping that we can have those discussions very soon, but I can't give you an exact date at this point in time.
Circling back to the Security Council seat, I know that you have made climate change and fighting climate change a real priority, and you have talked at length about that. I would note that, for example, activist Greta Thunberg signed a letter to UN ambassadors of small island states saying that Canada and also Norway, or arguing that those countries, including this one, are kind of only paying lip service to fighting climate change, and urged those that she was writing to take that into account when voting for the Security Council seat. What is your response to that?
Well, I think that all of us have to redouble our efforts with respect to the climate crisis. Look, this thing is coming on to us much more rapidly than we think. I haven't seen the letter. I've heard about it, and therefore I'm not going to comment on a letter that I've not seen myself. But what I do know is that all of us across the entire global community, we need to recognize that this climate crisis is not going away. For us in the region, the hurricane season has started. What is of greater concern than it's starting is that we've already seen in the season, in our part of the world, we're down to C. The next storm or hurricane will be called after D. Now, for us to go into our fourth storm, and we are only today at the 15th of June, tells you that we have to be prepared to expect some really difficult weeks going forward in circumstances where our debt is already under pressure, because we've had to literally accept that revenue in most Caribbean countries is likely to decline anywhere between 20 to 30%. And expenditure is going to increase because you have to take care of your health needs, and you still have to maintain those items that are critical to public safety or for schools or for vulnerable populations or simply the health expenditure alone.
You know, Canada has promised more aggressive targets. They are not yet in place. They have also fallen short of the current targets thus far, though there are promises to meet them in the future. Do you have any concerns about the action this country is taking against climate change and the effects of it?
Not specifically. I think that we have to be able to work collectively together in order to be able to ensure that there is greater progress, not just on the part of Canada, but on the part of the Americas. And that if Canada did as much as it was doing, but the rest of the Americas were not pulling weight, then we will not get there.
Okay, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time, but thank you so much for your time, Prime Minister. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, but may I say one thing to you before you leave, please?
Of course.
Barbados and Canada have had long relationships, as I said at the beginning. And I want Canadians to feel that you can come home to us, not just in the winter when it gets cold, but all like now. I know everyone needs some relief from the mental crisis that has been brought upon us by the pandemic, and feel that you can come home and enjoy your time in Barbados. We'll wait for you with open arms, and in fact, in fairness, anywhere in the Caribbean, so that I hope that you can see that Canada and the Caribbean, our relationship goes back centuries, not years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Take care. Come home.
And that is the Prime Minister of Barbados. You heard something in there that jumped out at me, and that is that she has written a letter to the Prime Minister about asking public health officials to start a discussion about the potential for Canadians, to travel to Barbados again. We certainly wanted to follow up here at Power and Politics with the Prime Minister's office and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to find out if that's even a possibility, if those discussions have begun. I want to read to you what they told us. Canada is pleased. This is from Adam Austin, who's a spokesperson to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Canada is pleased to have extremely deep ties to Barbados and other CARICOM countries with whom we work closely on a range of issues, including climate change. We understand the importance of tourism to our Caribbean partners and will continue to discuss how best we can help them manage the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our clear advice to Canadians remains to avoid all non-essential travel outside of the country. People returning to Canada from abroad are subject to mandatory 14-day quarantine. Any decision regarding international travel will be made based on the best advice of the medical experts from the Public Health Agency of Canada. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.